My name is Anne Karson, and you can probably hear right away that I'm not a native of this country. I grew up in South Africa. I was born in London to South African parents and brought to the country as a baby. So I spent my childhood in South Africa, much of it in Cape Town. In my late teens, well, really it was my early 20s by then, I went to Europe, typical colonial behavior, and traveled around Europe for a couple of years. When I came back, by the time I came back, I was feeling very responsible for my country's adverse behavior. And so, although I had joined the Liberal Party before I left, when I was at the University of Cape Town, I came back with a whole fresh intention to be really active. So I walked into the Liberal Party offices to discover, Liberal, by the way, I should explain, in South Africa really has no other meaning than multiracial, or then, at that time, didn't. So I walked into the Liberal Party offices and discovered that heads were rolling, in a sense that I'll touch on in a minute. So I was rapidly one of the leaders in the Cape. I became deputy chairperson of the Liberal Party in the Cape, and I was an editor. I edited a newspaper that very much leant towards the Liberal Party. I mentioned heads rolling. Banning was the order of the day. The political leaders of all kinds that were opposed to the government were mostly banned. That's a loose term for what actually happened. My turn came pretty rapidly because heads were rolling. And I was in leadership position. So banning for me meant that I was restricted to a little municipal area. And many people, I shouldn't say most, many were house arrested. But in my case, it was a municipal area. The main restriction was that you were banned from attending gatherings. And gatherings were being defined by the courts as being with more than one person at a time. And so really you couldn't leave your house unless you were maybe just going to buy toothpaste or something. You could converse with the shopkeeper, but you really couldn't be with more than one other person if you left your house. And even in your house. There were other things that went with it, like you couldn't be published, you couldn't speak in public, you couldn't you couldn't enter a school, you couldn't go to a railway station, you couldn't go to the airport, you couldn't leave the area without the permission of a magistrate. One major thing for me about being banned was that one of the restrictions was that you couldn't enter the group area in which another race lived. And we all carried cards saying what race we were. And I was a social worker. So I spent a lot of time in townships, African and mixed race, coloured is the word in South Africa, townships. But I had reached the point where I was really in a supervisory position. I was a case manager. And so I was office bound largely. So that didn't make that much difference, fortunately. Social workers' salaries were subsidized by the government, and mine was, of course, withdrawn. So I was lucky in having a sympathetic employer, and provided I took the financial loss, it was okay to continue to work for them. So that's what I did. Why was I banned? I would love to know. We were never given reasons. Maybe it was the newspaper. I attended, multiracial gatherings, both political and just social. I'm sure I held a banner or two. Who knows? It was like a glimpse of being black. You had no rights. I had a friend who thought I should meet a friend of hers, and clearly didn't understand any of this at all. She was on me. No, 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 it can't be what you're saying. Of course you can meet with me and my friend. Of course we can get together and you can meet her. To shut her up, really, I agreed to meet her on the slopes of Table Mountain. And in the bushes, right? Nobody was going to see. Well, she quarreled with her boyfriend that morning, and he went to security police. So out of the bushes came these policemen who arrested me, and I was charged and received a sentence of, if I remember rightly, something like 2 months for 2 years, and suspended for 2 years, which sounds not too bad until you consider something else. One thing I think I did not mention among the things that happen when you are banned was that I was required to report to the police once a week. And that, if you failed, carried a mandatory sentence of a year, all of which could be suspended except for 1 week. Now, one time I did forget to go to the police, but I was not caught. But I realized then that those 2 suspended sentences coming into operation, I'd be in jail for more than a year for absolutely nothing. And that made me think. There were people who needed the defense and so on for really serious charges. And money was at a premium for that. So I decided I really needed to leave. And of course I knew I would be welcome in Britain. I had my birthright there. South Africa would not give me a passport. They would give me, and did, a one-way exit permit. That meant that if I came back, I would be jailed or deported. So it was a one-way ticket to exile. So that's what I did. I went to England, and there I met my American husband, and the rest, as they say, is history. Did I ever get to return before things changed? And yes, I did one time. If I'd been black, I wouldn't have tried. But as it was, my father was dying, and I did get permission from the Minister of Justice to return. I was house arrested for 1 month in my brother's house. And that was it. I had to go.